I put on makeup.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce a longtime friend. I can't even remember the year we met, but let's just say in another chapter of our life, we got to meet. Her name is Adrienne.
OEHLERS.
Thank you. I didn't want to botch it because I knew her as Adrienne Gibbons, and now she's married.
Yeah.
She's probably, without a doubt, the smartest guest we've had on our show. She's not only a Broadway actor, but she's also currently working on getting her PhD. Her brain is so big, and we are going to learn so much from her. She went and got her BA from Barnard College at Columbia. She's performed extensively in musical theater in numerous regional theaters, in national and European tours as a Radio City Rockette.
She's also a member of AEA, SAG-AFTRA, and AGVA, and she was in the original cast
Drum roll.
of Mel Brooks The Producers on Broadway.
What? She is a candidate for her PhD at OSU in the theater department. Her research and her creative work intersect with dance and focus on musical theater, women's roles in the stage, and the evolution of the showgirl. She's
I did your research.
unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome our smartest, most talented guest so far. Adrienne!
Oh, shush. Oh, my goodness. Hi.
Let's get what to do. First of all, can you remember when we met?
Yeah.
How many years ago?
Oh. So I lived in Pittsburgh on and off between the years of I was going to date me, right? 1996 to 2000, which is when my husband was going to medical school there. So it was in those 4 years that I met you. I'm trying to think of our first hair. Was that?
No,
Were you in hair?
Hair.
Okay, Carousel.
Carousel. She did
But The
makeup.
Wiz.
She did my makeup for the show. That's important to know.
Yeah.
She's such a sweet person, and I looked a hot mess, and she's like, "Let me help you." Okay. What else?
But The Wiz with Billy Porter.
Okay. Can we take a minute with this?
Yeah, we're going to have to take a minute with that.
Okay.
The white girls in The Wiz. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Paul's favorite story. So it may seem odd to audiences that two very pale women were involved.
Very white.
Very white. Were involved in The Wiz. I believe we were the only two. Okay. Yeah. It was an African American cast.
Yeah.
With the exception of these two translucent beauties. We were in the show. And I have to say, it was one of the most fun experiences I have ever had. It was so ridiculous. And so, what do you remember about it?
Oh, I remember Billy just, coming back to Pittsburgh and having, I don't know if it was his directorial debut, but he was very much like, I'm taking a chance here. I'm doing something new. And he would like sing how he wanted everyone to like, you could do it like this, right? He just demonstrated over and over again, like how he wanted things done, which was so awesome.
And it was a modge podge of people. Like, it was people we had never met before, which was great.
Yeah.
Who was his assistant choreographer that was hilarious? Do you remember?
Tim. I kept in touch with Tim for a while. I kept in touch with Tim for a while. Tim, he was doing Aida on Broadway, and he had taken a break because he was injured. And he was like, "What are you doing here in Pittsburgh? You need to come to Broadway." And I was like, "Okay."
Done.
I'm on my way. So we continue to stay in touch, which, at the time it was hard to do, to stay in touch with people. It wasn't like we had the Facebook. Tim, I'll come to me.
That's okay. It was just an absolute hoot. I mean, it was an absolute hoot.
and the talent. I mean, ridiculous. There's a bunch of young kids from CMU. Asmarette, do you remember her?
Yes.
And she has continued on into Broadway land. So many Pittsburgh people. It's the Pittsburgh to Broadway pipeline. I mean, so many people I worked with on these small stages in Pittsburgh, you know, I continue to cross path with.
It is kind of crazy because we're a little big town. We think we're big, but we're just
We
this
are big.
little town. And we do have a lot of cred, street cred.
Huge, 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 huge. Yeah. Because I think the arts are so valued in Pittsburgh, because there's so many numerous ways as a kid to get involved with theater, because you have straight places and you have, you know, like August Wilson coming back to do these crazy things. You have a number of university settings. So that sort of filters all together. It's like Chicago, like they feed off each other and then people want to come.
Well, you know, traditionally too, as artists, Pittsburgh was a stop when people would go on the road between New York and Chicago.
Right.
Oh.
You would usually get a gig there. You'd stay the night. It was in that road. So
Yeah.
a lot of great artists came through town, and a lot of people left town that way
Well,
too.
you know what? Aside music, but we also had a vaudeville house in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
But yeah, it was really important. You know, when you were going from Chicago to New York,
Okay.
really important stop.
And the other, I think also, you know, as I look back on Pittsburgh, I mean, I would love to live there again. And I always tell my kids they should go to school there. But it's such a diverse, ethnically diverse town. It's such a socioeconomically diverse town. And so you get, things happen when these people mix together, right? And so you have the Irish rep there. You have really strong Black communities, Black theater. Yeah, I just remember all of those different neighborhoods and intersections. Yeah.
All right, so let's get started with our interview portion.
Okay.
So first thing I'm going to ask you is, how are you doing, and where are you calling us from?
Oh, I'm living in Ohio. I live in a very small town in Ohio, like a working class town, one of the many Springfields. I'm about directly between Columbus and Dayton. And so I commute to Ohio State University. How am I doing? I would say, so I am no longer I would not consider myself at this point a working professional in terms of performance. So that has not impacted me in the way so many people's lives have been put on hold. Of course, my life has been impacted massively by the coronavirus, including my husband, who's a doctor, my kids. I have 4 kids whose schooling just got derailed. And then my own work where I am with OSU has definitely sort of hit a few potholes, speed bumps, we'll call them. Yeah, I'm okay. I think it took a long time. I've had sort of this has been a tough year, and I think I'm on the other end of it.
Have you been vaccinated?
Yeah, it's one of 2.
Good. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's huge. And actually, when Steve got vaccinated with the very first rounds, because we didn't know how long it would take for the rest of us to catch up, Ohio's doing really well with vaccinations. And when Steve got vaccinated, I was like, okay, I can breathe, because early in the beginning, we just planned that he would get it. He would get sick. He was one of the ones doing the testing. He has several patients who have died. He did a testing at this a factory here in town that wound up having a huge outbreak. He tested like 80 people who wound up testing positive with COVID, like early in the beginning, and he didn't get it. So he had all of the gear on. And so then I felt a lot like, okay, this stuff, the masks work.
Yeah, there you go. That's lesson number 1, students, masks work.
Yeah.
So, you know what? You said that you're not actively performing, but that's something I want to come back to, because we're sort of, we're educators, but we're also, we're still working. And it's something I'm going to circle back to. But what I want to start with is your education and what you got from it. Like when you went to Barnard, or maybe even outside of Barnard, how you felt it prepared you, or maybe there was things that you wish you had learned from your institution.
Yeah. There's so many things I could answer about that. I always loved school, actually. Sorry, guys. I loved school. I was in a great school. I did well in school. My parents wanted me to go on, my interest as a high schooler and younger in theater and dance was all a nice hobby. And my parents kind of couldn't conceive that you could have a career in that because it was so outside. My mom's a teacher. My dad owned a store. So then when I just wanted to go to school in New York City, and I grew up in Rhode Island. So New York wasn't that far, but we didn't have a lot of money. I had only been to New York City once. And yet I just decided that's where I wanted to be. And so my parents were basically like, if you could get into, the Ivy League school there, then go ahead. But I couldn't consider like NYU or any of the theater schools. So I went early decision and got in, and it was great. And what they didn't have is a musical theater program. And so they had a classical, kind of even contemporary music program. So they really were interested in composing like contemporary music. And they had a very classic drama program where like clown and mask work and all of that stuff, which I had zero experience in. And I was like, that doesn't look good to me. So I wound up, and then they have a really great dance program. So that's where I started for the first time really being hardcore. That's the first time I ever took dance every day of the week.
Wow, college.
Yeah, I just couldn't afford it growing up. I took it twice a week growing up.
I bet when she walked in the room, the professor was like, "Oh, yes."
No, but
that blew
my mind.
Yeah.
You were a rockette, and you didn't start dancing until you were in college?
No, I danced. I definitely danced. Like I started tap at age 8, and I definitely danced, but I was not the competition kid who danced every day and dance was your life. And I danced twice a week. I did the recital. I mean, I was just at the little school. And then in high school, we wound up having 2 dance teachers come down from Boston. So I did have some bigger teachers. And they were very like, you could do this. I was like, really? So I was really good at tap. But I never really took ballet. And so that was when I went to college. They were like, oh, you need some ballet lessons. And at school, the whole program there was very, very technique oriented. Like people from Barnard College a lot of them were dancers who could have gone into a ballet company professionally out of high school and decided to go to college instead. So they were kind of like recovering bunheads who wanted more than just the ballet life, or they were ballet dancers who wanted to transition into modern. So we had a lot of people who went into like big companies, the Merce Cunningham Company, Mark Morris Company, Twyla Tharp. And we had a lot of dance teachers. So like my 4 years there was massive dance, but they didn't have tap. I actually had to go on Saturdays, and I went to Steps, New York City, which is one of the 2 dance studios, and took tap on Saturdays. And I worked in the dance department as a work study student to afford that. And, and I took voice lessons, and I was a music major. So ultimately I was a music major with a dance minor. And all of the musical theater I did was either like our student shows or, community theater, but in New York City.
Yeah. So you were really, you were piecing it together.
Always. My whole life I've been piecing it together. Even now.
I'm exactly the same way. Like my parents, I went to a theater school, but like growing up, but like finding.
Yeah. And there's so much about that. And I feel like it's such a skill, and it's allowed me to create this life because I never went in the pipelines. There are places that are pipelines, and there are schools that like give you all of this stuff. So I would say of the things that I did not know how to do when I graduated, I did not know how to audition. So no one ever taught me that.
Okay. So this is huge.
Yeah. So
if you're listening to this, I am right there with you. I have some horror stories about that. So what did you learn? How did you get there?
So a few little things that happened. One, I was a very classical soprano, or mezzo. And then I sort of had to develop a more mixed voice that could be used in theater. But I also was, I'm not a good enough dancer to be in a dance company in terms of like a real modern dancer or ballet dancer. Plus I'm 6 feet tall. But I was really getting strong. I mean, I was getting to be a very good dancer. And so I could go to auditions either as a dancer who sang or as a singer who moved. So if I went as a dancer who sang, these are ensemble auditions. If I went as a dancer and I was the type of dancer who could do that choreography, when I got to the singer part, all the other dancers were like, oh, we have to sing. And I'm like, oh, I get to sing. Wow. And if I went to the singer audition and I made it through to the movement, all the singers were like, oh, we have to move now. And I'm like, great. So in terms of like having the balance, that's where everything worked together. I was never the best singer in the room and I was never the best dancer, but I often was the best singer who could dance.
Yes.
And dancer who could sing.
That's what it's about. It's about, you know, knowing your strengths and knowing that, and I've been the same way. I'm a good mover.
Yeah, you are.
I'm not a dancer who can sing. I'm a mover. Wait.
No, you're a singer.
You're a singer who moves well.
Who moves well. But that's
yeah.
The thing, though. You're right, though. There are a lot of people who don't fill in those gaps. They're like, I can sing, I'm gorgeous, and I'll land the role. And that's not the reality.
So the two things I think like about this, like sort of cobbling it together. One is that I've always been realistic about my own skill set and where I fit in the room. So I used to tell my husband, like I would go into a dance class often, and dance classes are structured. So you have like a warm up, especially like a musical theater class dance or jazz dance. You warm up in the center, and that takes like a half an hour. And then you do this movement across the floor. So more dynamic movement. And then you learn a combination and you do the combination. And in the warm up, it's a lot about balance. It's a lot about strength. You know, I'm usually in I would say the bottom third during that part. And then we go across the floor and I'm a dynamic mover. Like I cannot like balance forever and do 6 turns. We go across the floor and I'm a dynamic mover. Suddenly I'm like in the middle third. And then we would do the choreography and I would be in the top third. Like and this is like in a New York City, like in another smaller school, I might do better. But like when I was really new, like out of college, because I was like, can I do this? And I'd start every class kind of demoralized, like, ooh, these people can balance so much more than I can. And then I was like, oh no, wait, I have these skills. So then I was able to sort of understand when I went to an audition, I was able to see this movement. I'm like one of the bottom half in this audition room. This particular choreographer I don't look good doing his work. Like I was able to recognize that. And then I was able to recognize, oh, this audition, whether they keep me or not, that's up to them. But I look good doing this movement. And this is the style that I should do. And so then I would be able to say, I'm prioritizing these auditions because these are the ones I'm going to do well at. Like Wayne Salento, like he moves super fast. He's a short man who does a lot of knee droppings. I'm like, if you need knee pads, I'm not your girl. But if you want long lyrical, Kathleen and Rob. Marshall. I'm like Kathleen Marshall. Like I look great doing her stuff. I always got kept for her.
I think that's great, Adrienne, because it's so honest. It's so I got to tell you this story. I didn't even plan on telling you. I was delusional. You know, when I started off in my 20s, I was like, I can do any show. I'm just going to show up. I'm going to tell you the time that I auditioned for a chorus line. Pause for laughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, there was no logic behind it. And I showed up.
I'll have those.
I mean, yeah, and I showed up and it was actually on a stage in Pittsburgh. It was on the Byam stage, which in itself was like insane that we were auditioning on the stage.
It's a local company.
It was Gargaro.
Oh, so I did it.
Probably.
Yeah.
But
that's the one that Gavin did and all of the.
Yes, and what's his name? He does. Oh my gosh, his name will come. So they do the ballet combination, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I grab my bag and I start to leave, and they're like, okay, now we're gonna do jazz, and I was like, well, I've taking a jazz class. I'll do the jazz. Put my bag down, and I'm like, no, yeah. I kind of slink out, and they're like, okay, now we're going to ask you to just line up and tell us about yourself. And I was like, and this is where I will leave and redeem myself, because I was horrible. So I put myself at the end of the line, like everyone lined up, like in a chorus line. And everyone's doing their chorus line. They're like, well, I've been taking ballet since I was 2, and da-da-da. And it got to me. And I'm like, how can I leave and see the thread of dignity of myself? So it's like, if I can make them laugh and walk out the room. So it got to me, and I went, kiss this job goodbye. I think I sang like 4 measures or something. And the whole, like, everyone was like, what? And I picked up my dance bag, and I was like, hey, and I left. And he remembered me. What is his name? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I can't. He's here in Pittsburgh.
Not Tomei.
Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed.
Director?
Yeah, director, choreographer. It's going to come to me after this interview. Anyway, he remembered that moment.
That's amazing.
He's like, but that's being aware of your skill set.
Yeah, for sure.
I should have been taking ballet. I should have been taking dance class. And that moment was a turning point for me. I was like, I need to know what I can do. I say this with full, I had those moments too. I was in college, and I knew friends that were auditioning for summer jobs like Disney. And I went and auditioned for Disney singing Think of Me from Phantom of the Opera, because I envisioned myself as a lyric soprano and had no idea about type. I had no idea. What do you mean you don't want a funny, quirky, 6-foot-tall Christine? That's brilliant.
I can hit those notes, right? So, yeah, no. I didn't.
It's one of the things that, as a teacher, it's so hard to say to a kid, this is what you need to start working on, right? You got to preserve the ego. You got to preserve it. And you deal with this a lot too.
A lot, yes, I do. We're in a culture now where the emphasis is really great. It's on encouragement, and it's to make a student feel good. But at the same time, kids, they don't take criticism. You don't do this well.
Mm-hmm.
What your strengths are, go after. And kids now kind of grow up thinking, well, I can do whatever I want to do in any kind of field. And it's important in the arts to know what your wheelhouse is, so that you can really benefit from doing what you do best.
How do you
how do I deal with it? It's really hard, because also I think the culture today is we want to knock out these stereotypes, right? We want to break the stereotypes, and yet in musical theater especially, so many shows are built on these archetypes. So I try to think about this idea of type as like the entry place. Like, this is where you go and you make your mold, or you get in the door, because the door is the hardest part and the door is the narrowest part. So you go in with your strengths, and then once they know you, you're like, oh, and by the way, I can do this, right? Or there are more and more complicated roles that are out there. So finding the roles, I think that show those strengths.
That's a great point. On your journey as an actor, how did you make the realization of things you needed to tweak? Like, living in New York and auditioning, what were the light bulbs that were like, how did that happen for you?
I will sort of thread that together with your other question about how I learned to audition, because when I think I was a junior or senior in college, and again, this was a moment of being in New York, but I had a dance teacher that was the choreographer for the Gilbert and Sullivan Players, which is like an off-Broadway company that did. So I started doing these Gilbert and Sullivan shows, which were off-Broadway when I was in college, and realizing, like, kind of again where my level was. that was the first time I thought I could maybe make a go of this as a career. So the end of my senior year, I decided, and I'm like working towards my classical voice recital, right? At the end of my senior year. And I started auditioning for all the summer stock jobs. And I said, I'm going to give myself 1 year. I'm going to live in New York for 1 year. I'm going to make auditioning my job. And I'm just going to audition for as many things as possible. And I'm going to go to jobs that I might not get, because I'm going to teach myself how to audition. And I'm just going to make auditioning the thing that I do for the year. And that'll be my training, and it's free. And I'll have a job that's my survival, right? I couldn't afford like audition classes and stuff like that. And before I graduated that year, I got a chorus line in the summer. And I did that at Theater by the Sea in Rhode Island.
Yeah. Wanted to work.
Oh, so great. And that company was truly like it was an equity and non-equity combined company. And so the way that the show was rehearsed was all on equity rules, and everything was super professional. And like so many of the cast went on to do amazing things, or had done already amazing things. So it was Tony Stevens, who's like this ridiculously amazing. He's passed away, but he was Bob Fosse's assistant, and he worked on Chicago, and he did Chorus Line. He was in the original workshops of a Chorus Line. So anyway, it was an amazing production. And then before I left that, I wound up getting the national tour of Will Rogers' Follies. So then I was like, yeah, okay, I think I can make this work. But that decision, and when I came back from Will Rogers too, I had to sort of, again, if you do a show for a year, you have to kind of relearn to audition all over again.
That's another great point. You okay, backing up. Backing up to your summer stock experience.
Mm-hmm.
That is a great like launching pad for all young artists, but also for established artists. I think there's kids today, I don't think they realize that your job as an actor is to look for work.
The work is the fun.
Yeah, the work is the icing on the cake, but like it is, there's like a complacency. I think sometimes people get jobs and they're like, I got it, and the next job will come. Sometimes it does, but that's not in the reality. It's not how it works. You got out there and you hustled again.
Yeah, and part of it is like that catch-22 when you live in New York. If I take a job that takes me out of town, I won't be there for the auditions that come around that I'm right for. And what took me a long time to learn is that idea of what you were talking about, that director remembered you, right? That's what happens with casting directors. You go to see them 3 times in a month, and then they're like, oh, you know what? You should come in for this project. And they remember you, even if you're completely wrong for the thing you go in for. If you give a good audition, which you don't always, but if you give a good audition, right, then it like builds. It's like this positive thing about you. And I remember being cast in The Producers and them being like, we're so happy we finally found the right fit for you. And I was like, what? Like this idea that they always liked me.
Yeah. Well, this is something we've learned in all our interviews. One of the best jewels of wisdom, and I've been saying it to my kids, there's no such thing as a wasted good audition.
100%.
And the fact that you brought it up is just reinforcing that you are banking, you are putting it in the bank, and casting directors and choreographers and directors, they are noticing, which leads, I know Paul's dying to ask this question.
So we talked about this in the intro. The way I met you obviously was through my now wife, but this is when we were dating. How many years ago was this?
A long time.
This was a long time ago. This is when we were
like probably 18 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I met you through Chris.
You guys look the same, by the way. You look the same. It's ridiculous.
So do you. You look the same.
He's like one of those people that gets in a cold tub of water. What's that?
Cold immersion therapy.
He's like doing some cryogenic thing. Go ahead.
So I got to meet you. My experience meeting you. Incredible ways to meet a human being. because I went to New York with my wife and we saw you on Broadway in the biggest musical of all time. Still
the most awarded,
the most Tony Award winning musical, holds the record. We went, not only did you take us backstage.
Oh my God, can we talk about that?
And we went through the years of the theater. We saw the pit. We saw.
Well, we met the man, and now I'm embarrassed. He's passed.
The man who was.
Gary Beach.
Gary Beach.
Gary Beach.
Mm.
He was in a chair, like getting makeup or something done, and he couldn't have been nicer. And I was
he's a doll.
It was incredible. It was amazing. And the show was the greatest thing I've ever seen, even though we couldn't sit together. We were like...
And I laughed so hard during that show that I hit my head on the chair in front of me. That's God honest truth. When it got to the point, I know exactly where it was. When it got to the point where the woman lighting designer appears, I laughed so
Shirley
hard.
Markowitz.
I laughed so hard and banged my head on the seat in front of me because I was like hyperventilating. I was laughing so hard.
It was so amazing. And this comes back to what you were saying about auditions. So you told the best story I've ever heard about auditioning for producers and your interaction with Mel Brooks. And can you please tell us that?
I hope that my memory of it now is like as good as it was in the moment then.
What did you have for the show?
Not many. It's kind of one of those things. Like I was working on Cape Cod at the Cape Playhouse, and I was doing Will Rogers. And I remember when I got that job, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Because I needed equity weeks, and I was like, "This is the show I did like right out of college." I was kind of like upset and like with my career path, and I was like, and then I went to do Will Rogers, and it was like a stellar production. Every single woman in the ensemble had been a Rockette. I mean, it was amazing, right? All of us went to New York and auditioned for the producers. All of us.
Yeah, because
so we watched
the exact time.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So we all watched the movie beforehand, like all together. And I remember not really knowing the movie, and I was like, "This is a little bit odd." Okay, so I had auditioned for Susan Stroman a lot, and I had made it to the end a lot. And I had been measured for costumes once. I mean, it didn't work out, but it was like, yeah. So if I could work for anyone, it was her. And so we had a day of auditions with, I didn't have an agent at the time. So I just went to the open call for equity open call, and we danced first, and we danced a lot, and it was a long day, and they made cuts. And then we sang, and then we came back. They called us back for callback. And I think maybe two of us from this company of the Will Rogers got called back. And of course I'm thinking like, oh, like they had cut so many, this is going to be a small callback. One of those, even at this point in the business, I didn't realize there had also been an agent's call, and there had also been an invited call, and there had also been a workshop of the producers.
Let me just, for those watching, young students, this is the reality of the business. When you show up at an open call, you are like the fifth group down.
I think about it as concentric circles. Every time I thought I made it into another circle, I found out there's 20 more smaller circles. So like getting a phone call from Stro and saying like, "Hey, can you come to the workshop?" I would say that's like the inner circle. Like getting called in personally to work on the development process. I never got to that point. So that would be like, to me, I didn't even know about that. I didn't even know about that circle till I was truly like on Broadway. Then I was like, oh, that's how these things work. Like, I didn't know. So then when I went to the callback, it was huge. And there was all these people from Broadway shows and all these people who were working on Broadway shows who they had to do it on a Monday. So people who didn't have a show could go. And yeah. And then we kept doing the same choreography. You had a little bit of improv at one time, which is like not my thing, but they just wanted to, it was kind of fun. We had to do a bunch of kicks, a lot of like showgirl walking, tap dance. That had a cartwheel in the choreography, I remember. Like, I mean, there was like crazy stuff, right? And then they kept us. They cut. So I got down, there was probably less than 20 people in the room at the end. And this is only women. The guys were on a different day. At one point we were together and then they separated us out. Because I do remember auditioning with guys at one point. So then, oh, I know. So the first time we auditioned, we had to sing and they asked us to tell a joke or a funny story.
And he's in the room. And by he, I mean,
yeah, so we have a whole table. So that was amazing. No, the very first audition, Mel Brooks is not there. So we have the casting director, we have the director, we have the assistant, we have the musical director, we have the musical assistant. So there's about 8 people in the room. I'm not particularly good at jokes. You can ask anyone in my family. So I'm like, oh God, like a joke. Like, you know, it's like, get your song ready and get your joke ready. I'm like, I don't have a joke ready. So I was like, oh, you know, I'll tell this funny story, which is a little off color. So I won't repeat it, but it was an urban myth that I like told as if it had happened to me. And it was pretty, it's a little saucy and it was pretty funny. They laughed. And then I think that what happened were a lot of people were coming in and telling stories like, one time I went and performed on Cats and I forgot my tail. And they're like, that's not so funny. So when they asked us to the callback, they said, no more stories. It has to be a joke. You have to bring in your song and a joke. And they told us this on the phone for the callback. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I went and sang, and I sang a song that I sang was kind of this wacky soprano song that actually was a comic song. And gosh, I say we'll be sweethearts again. It's like an old song. And it has this, it's a song about a woman who's poisoned her lover. And there's and it even has a little monologue in the middle, like, which I might have done. I can't remember. And then and then he actually had me do warm-ups to see how high I could go. And this was Patrick Brady, who I didn't know, at the piano, who was our musical director. And of course I had no idea who he was. So then at the callbacks, so there's 2 things. So we're at the callbacks and we are there all day. I mean, it is 6 o'clock in the evening. We've been there since 9 a.m. and we're waiting, and you can hear everyone going in and singing, and everyone's amazing. And there was this one girl who was there who the 2 of us were often up for the same. We were down for Cats and she got it and I didn't. So she and I have seen each other a lot in auditions.
Been there, done it. Been there, seen it, done it. Yeah.
Yeah. So she sings just before I go in, and I'm chatting with somebody who seems to be like a monitor, or I don't know, maybe he works with the casting agency. I'm not really sure. And I'm the last one. So by the end, you know, the people they sing and then they leave. So we're dwindling. And we talked for like an hour. It turned out he was, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget his name. Jeff, he was the other casting director. He was Jeff Johnson of Johnson and Liff. So Vinnie Liff is in the room.
Not in the room.
Jeff Johnson is sitting in the ensemble and out in the house talking to people. And I don't know who he is. And I'm talking to him for like an hour.
That's sneaky.
And at the end, like as I left, I'm like, nice to meet you, I'm Adrienne. He's like, oh, I'm Jeff Johnson. And I'm like, good thing I'm a nice human. I have no idea if that was part of it, but if they definitely do those things, like, are these people we want to work with?
Yes.
I got to check on that one.
Good.
So be nice, because I just thought he was a monitor, but I'm like, oh, he's an older man. I'm like, you know, anyway. He had lived in Connecticut. I was taking the train in from Connecticut or something. So the story now, of course, is, so I go and I sing, I do my vocalizations, and then I'm going to tell my joke. And now Mel Brooks is there, and he's been there the whole day. So you're pretty comfortable, of course, but I'm also terrified. And so I decided I will tell just jokes that I can't mess up. So I have 2 very short jokes. And I said, where do you find a dog with no legs? And I'm like, you know, they're like, where? Because I make them respond. I'm like, so where do you find a dog with no legs? Where? I'm like, exactly where you left them. And then I did the second, probably this one's even worse. Then I said, knock, knock.
Who's there?
The interrupting cow.
The interrupting cow.
No!
I love it.
And I lost it. I don't know. I was just like, ba-bam. I'm like, and that's how you tell a joke, folks. Or I was completely like, I know I'm horrible at jokes. I just am here to laugh at myself. And that was my best shot. Like, my goal was to remember my words and yeah.
And your adrenaline is like kicking. Like,
oh yeah.
That's amazing. And
So anyway.
in the room, are they talking to you? Are they chatty, or is it all business?
Oh no, they're all like punchy at this point, and so all of this stuff. So they were very nice. They were talking and doing. Yeah, they were laughing, and they were very, very vocal, and it was a very warm room. And they were, yeah. And like Stro was there, and she's like, it's so good to see you again. You look so great. I mean, they're complimenting us and making us feel good. It was probably the only audition that I really felt I just did all the things I do best. I wasn't trying to like belt when like belting is not my favorite thing. Like, I sang a song that was in my wheelhouse. I did a joke. Like, I'm not a great joke teller, but I'm funny. Like, I like to laugh at myself. I'm happy to embarrass myself. And I didn't know how important that was. You needed to be a risk taker to be in that show, right?
So how did you find out that you got the job? Was that the final audition?
That was the last thing. Yep. And I was the last one. And then I left.
Wow.
And I don't think I knew that was Jeff Johnson until I left after I sang.
Oh, good. Because
he waited and said goodbye. And that's when he introduced himself. Then I was like, Steve, my husband. I was like, I just like spent an hour talking to the casting director. And he was less involved. It was really Vinny Liff, who was the main guy. And Jeff was kind of semi-retired, but still, that was a big deal. And then how much, I'm going to say a week later, they called.
Who called you?
Vinny Liff. Yeah. And they left a message, and I had to call them back. Like, they just said, please call our office. And, I'm like, my heart is going just even talking about this. It's probably like one of the top 5 moments of my life, right? And I'm like, they don't call you when you don't get the job. And I told Steve, I'm like, if they want me to be an offstage singer, like, oh my God, like, this would be incredible, right? So they called, and they're like, we want to offer you a position in the ensemble of the producers on Broadway as the swing. And I was just like, oh my God, what's a swing?
Yeah, the hardest job in the world.
I knew what a swing was, but I was like, it's like, I remember it's the same feeling when I got a chorus line. I was like, can I do it? Like, that's hard. Can I do it? I've never been a swing. And thankfully, not only was the show experience amazing, but though working for us as a swing, which do your students all know what a swing is?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that there's confusion between understudy swing.
Yeah.
So,
understudy, swing, cover. Those are all. So a swing is a position, like an official position, where you cover or learn the tracks of a number of the ensemble. And you go in for them for a variety of reasons. They can be sick, they can be injured, they can be on vacation. Sometimes somebody gets hurt for a day. They can go out of the show in the middle of the show. Once you get into like the long running things, people are putting in for week vacations at a time. And so for our show, we had 6 dancers and 3 character women, and they had 2 swings. And so we each had a first and a second like priority list. So my first priority list was 5 of the dancers. And then my second tier was the other dancer and the 3 character women. So I had to learn all 9 women and be able to go on for any of them at any moment.
Now remember, we're not only talking about like learning their blocking, we're talking about learning their harmonies, we're talking about their physical track, you know, that they have to do for costume changes.
I was gonna say their backstage track, which is almost harder.
Wow.
Yeah.
Her brain, she's the smartest person we're ever. Her brain is enormous. So
And when I think about other companies like 42nd Street, you might cover 14 women, but it's really just like a right side and the left side. Like the tracks are really similar. And this is really, it really was an ensemble. So even though there were 6 dancers who did some of like, I Want to Be a Producer was a dancing number with just those 6, but there was a lot of numbers like Little Old Ladyland where everyone was together, men and women. And especially like as the show got further, there were more people out and you kind of had to piece things together. Those are my favorite shows where we just made it up.
Wait, I'm going to go back to this. So what is a cover and what is it?
So a cover is kind of very rarely done these days. A cover is someone who's hired to usually basically understudy a particular star. So that cover has no job. They usually call in every show and say, am I on? Do you need me tonight? And they're kind of excused. So their job is to step in only for the star at a moment's notice.
That's the thing.
So they don't have to be at the theater.
That's the famous
anymore.
story, you know, Ethel Merman's cover. Do you know who Ethel Merman's cover was?
No, who was it?
Elaine Stritch.
Oh.
And she would call in because Ethel Merman never missed.
Right.
And she'd call in. There's a famous song that she does where she's covering Ethel Merman and doing another show and everything.
Oh my, that's right. I saw her at Elaine Stritch's show.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you're right. It is rare. It's like maybe if the star is older or it's like
Bernadette Peters, or now a lot of the times they might have especially they might have the star do 6 shows and the cover do 2 shows, something like that. But so an understudy would be someone who's performing in the show in another track and understudying. So then everyone kind of moves up. So for example, in our show, Nathan Lane was the big star. They considered having a cover for him, but instead they had an understudy. The understudy was the guy who played Franz Liebken, who's the German guy. And so if he went on for Nathan Lane, then another understudy went up to that role, and then a swing went on for the understudy track. So like 5 things would shift if Nathan was out.
That's who we saw, the show that we saw.
Yes.
Nathan Lane was out, so his understudy.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay. You saw Brad Oscar, who is now a big man. Like he wound up taking over that role, and Brad Oscar then went on to do Something Rotten and Addams Family, and yeah.
He was amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the for my kids, right? So you are at the theater every day then, as a swing.
Yeah. So
You
yeah.
are on call, right?
Yeah, so we are required to be there in our dressing rooms and every show's a little different. We had to be there all the way through. We could leave like 20 minutes early, like after the big Springtime for Hitler show. If someone went out in that number, we would have gone on in the middle of the show. But after that, they are just kind of like, yeah, we'll just do one less. We're not going to have you go on for the very last number. But I definitely did that where I went on mid-show.
And did you ever go on as one of the second cover, the Little Old Ladies, and what was that like?
So what happened was, so I wound up staying in the show for 4 years. And I didn't actually, we opened in April. I don't think I performed until May, but we had done a whole 3 months in Chicago. I didn't perform at all in Chicago. So I had a really long time to learn. We would shadow them backstage, but also to stress. Like, I have it in my brain. That's really different from doing it, right? So my very first performance, I went on, I think they just called me like that afternoon and said, you're going to go on for this woman tonight. And, I'm like, oh God, this is it. And Steve, actually, my husband, was able to come and see my debut performance. And I will never forget, at the end of the show, when the curtain came down, Nathan turned around, and he is notoriously stingy and notoriously is not a big fan of understudies and covers, because he likes his show the way his show is, right? And he bowed to me. And I was like,
I'm dead. I'm dead.
Wow.
so yeah.
That's why. And you know what? Shame on him. I'm sorry, Nathan. If we ever work together, we'll have a private conversation.
I think he's come around a lot. He's really mellowed.
Hardest job.
Well, and that show, that show was a mile a minute. It was just everybody was moving, going. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it is. It is literally. It's probably one of. I can't imagine the backstage. I can't imagine.
It's crazy, crazy, crazy. So then, what I did go on for my second covers, and the only thing I never did was Hold Me, Touch Me, which was the little old woman. Yeah. And again, as a 6 foot tall person, there's like a wrestling scene on the couch. I could barely fit on the couch. I had to go to understudy rehearsal every week. And so I rehearsed with other understudies and stuff like that. But what they would do is if Hold Me, Touch Me was out, they would do this half track where I would do all of this woman, Madeline Doherty's role. I would do her whole track except for Hold Me, Touch Me. And somebody else, one of the other older and smaller women would jump in to that little part. So I did everything but that little scene. But ultimately what happened was about a year in, one of the other swing left and they brought in a replacement swing, and she went on for this amazing track, which was this Kathy Fitzgerald's track, which was the bag woman in the beginning. She sits on Nathan's lap and she has some solo singing, and then she's Shirley Markowitz, the lesbian in Keep It Gay. So she has a number of, she's one of the 3 featured little old ladies on the bench so she has a number of little solos, little vignettes. And when the second swing that was hired did that part for the first time, Nathan was still working. And I don't know how it happened, but he said, I don't want her to do that anymore. I don't think she's funny.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
So they switched us, and they had me. That became my cover. My first cover was doing that crazy part, and that was one of the things that I loved so much. So in a year after the first year, I really got to do much more of the character stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it's well deserved. I mean, in a way, I will defend him. In a way, you want the quality of the show, and you want people that can land. I mean, comedy is hard, man.
Comedy is hard. And it wasn't that she was a bad swing. She was an amazing swing. In fact, she's one of my dear friends.
But
and
there's an essence, right?
Yeah. And that, as a swing, especially if a swing, you're covering so many multiple parts, not everyone's going to be a perfect fit.
Absolutely. That's amazing. And so he left and you were still in the show.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And then I stayed doing that. So the show had its ups and downs, I would say. We had a number of people come in and go. We had a very short term, I'm going to forget all their names. We had a guy from England come in right after Nathan Lane, who just got crushed in the reviews because he was just not funny, and he got fired. And then that's when they brought Brad Oscar, who was understudying him. They gave him the role for the next year. Then they brought in some people from the tour. We had a number of people.
I remember that there was a lot of, now that you say this, that must have been very difficult.
Well, even though the show was an amazing show. It really was this, as you were saying, Paul, it moved so fast, and Nathan was instrumental in creating it. And he is beyond smart. You have no idea. His brain is like rapid fire all the time. But because of that, he also had such an investment. Like, this was his baby too. So I think the show was hilarious without Nathan and Matthew, but they had made it really was so special with them. It never could compare. And so even though in theater history, I think it will go down as this big, important show, and it had all these Tonys, when you compare it to a show, I don't know, like Rent or Hamilton or these things that sort of have a life beyond, this is the memory, I think, or the theatrical impact of the producers really is going to be tied to the performance that the two of them did.
I agree. I mean, I do think their energy together, and I mean, it's
Yeah,
you know, and
it was.
I'm speaking of even just watching clips because we didn't get to see Nathan. You can see it, you know, you can
Yeah.
see. Matthew Broderick is like a major crush in my life. That's important to say. Ferris Bueller's Day Off is still probably my go-to feel-good movie. Is he? How was he? Is he that rapid fire? He seems very like.
He's the opposite.
Yes, I think that.
He's just like, okay, like, you want what? Like there's so many. So Matthew had an assistant who helped him manage life because Matthew just can't manage like logistics. Like, and you know, he was very nice. I won't say he was oblivious, but like the very first time they would swing me in during rehearsals as well. So people would get swung out, they get taken out to do a costume fitting or something, and they'd swing me in for rehearsal. And there was a part in the number where he dips one of the chorus girls, and I was being swung in, and he somehow hadn't registered for the whole hour that I was in the rehearsal. And he dipped me, and I was being Angie of Angie and the Prom, Angie Shore, showgirl extraordinaire. And he dipped me, and he goes, "You're not her."
That's hilarious.
I'm like, "Hi, Matthew." And I was like, "Do you know my name? Don't know." But like my favorite stories about him are we were in rehearsals, and we had this huge room, and he was like walking around. He couldn't find his shoes. He's in his sock feet. And he's like, "Oh, well, I'll find them tomorrow." And he walked out onto the New York sidewalk, and his car was there picking him up. But he was just like, "Oh, well." I'm like, "They're here somewhere. You didn't lose them."
Let's help him. Let's make this happen. That's hysterical.
So that's kind of like, like it's nothing really phases him.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, but if you change his song, yeah.
Something did phase Matthew Broderick when we saw the show.
Oh my goodness.
Wait a minute. Were you at the show where he stopped
the
second act? That is my other favorite Matthew story.
Wait. Yeah, I want to hear this. But when he did it, he ruined the entrance.
He ruined Gary's entrance.
Gary comes in.
Oh.
At the top of the stairs.
That's a different Matthew story. I don't remember this one. Tell me what happened.
So I mean, I knew the show, so like I knew what was about to happen. So he's in full drag. He's in the full
in the full Chrysler building. Yeah.
Building. And so there was like a eruption of laughter, and then Matthew
goes,
No, stop.
No. And he looks at them and he goes, "Wait." And he turns around and he comes to the front of the stage and starts
berating,
screaming, you know,
someone was taking pictures or something.
Wait, Nathan said that?
Like the whole audience was like,
Nathan or Matthew?
Matthew.
That seems a very Nathan thing to do.
No, it was Matthew.
No, it was Matthew.
Wow, okay.
You were like, sorry, go.
No, that's amazing. I so don't remember that.
Well, I mean, you did thousands of shows, so.
No, his story, the other one that was the top of Act 2, he does this big number with Katie Huffman, the Ula character, that face, and it's got these very repetitive lyrics, that face, that wonderful face, you know, and he got lost. And this is like 9 months in. And he just walked forward and he just said, like what you did with the finger, and he's like, "Can we just start this again?" But very much like in his Leo Bloom character, kind of like, oh, he's like, he's like, "Tell me those lyrics again." And so the conductor read him the lyrics. He's like, right. And then he started over.
That's funny.
So it was funny. Yeah.
That's endearing because he's like, "I'm human. I get it."
Yeah, that was very endearing. That's one of my like endearing Matthew stories. There's not a lot of, I can't think of many times Matthew berated the audience. That's interesting.
Adrienne, it was like he was screaming. I mean, he was
Well,
yelling
I mean,
at them.
he wasn't really screaming, but he was just
yelling
like,
at them.
Stop taking pictures. I can hear it.
I can see you.
I see you. Stop taking pictures. Like he was.
No, he was yelling. He was yelling. And so we were all like, because it had crescendoed to this hilarious.
Yeah.
And then it was like you could have heard a pin drop, and then he turned. He's like, okay. And the poor
Gary Beach.
Gary Beach is like, okay, cool. That was my entrance. You know, it was crazy.
Gary Beach, if you want to know comic genius, he delivered 120% in every show, in every rehearsal, in everywhere. I mean, I just never saw him, and he just thrived on that. I mean, he loved those moments.
Yeah.
He was amazing. I learned a lot from him.
That's
Like Nathan always gave it, but he was also, there were days he was just exhausted. I mean, it was an exhausting role, and you could just see it was a struggle for him some days. But Gary Beach just
they carried
loved
the
it.
show. I mean, they're
Oh yeah.
it is almost too much for, you know, that 8 shows a week. I don't know how people do it, because it is such a demanding, no break show. I don't know.
Mhm.
I mean, adrenaline, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah.
And 2 show days, and I mean, that's a lot.
In terms of one of the other things I just want to mention was, because I was such a focused on dance and music in college, like I took some acting classes along the way, but when I got into the producers and then started doing the comic stuff, and then I really was interested in doing that more. I kind of put myself through what I consider like a MFA program, like at Michael Howard Studios, where I took classes all the time, and I wound up getting a commercial agent, and I had this side business. So I think if I had stayed, and I'm happy, I wound up leaving at the end of 4 years. My husband, Steve, finished medical school, and we wanted to just have kids and have a different life. But if I had stayed, I was really sort of steering towards more acting stuff. The challenge of that was amazing. And I just loved that. So that informs a lot of what I do now in terms of why I went back to school for theater as opposed to become a dance teacher or teach music lessons. I think there's just something unfinished in the theater world. So I do think of myself as an artist scholar.
Okay, here, ask her this. I want to.
Okay. On that line, then, what would you today tell your younger artistic self?
I think the thing that took me the longest to learn was just to be myself.
I knew you were going to say it. Because that is the essence of everything, isn't it?
Because I always tried to fit what they wanted. And it, like, and so many shows are just so, like, if I go in for Chicago, like Chicago's a great fit for me, but of course I tried to sleek myself down, and I wore all the right outfits, and it would, I do think that would be a show that I would do well in. I could get cast, and I moved that way. But at myself, at my most self, I'm quirky, right? I'm kind of like I have the sexy part of me, but that's not the essence of who I am. That doesn't mean I shouldn't get that job, but I don't need to suppress that part to get, you know what I mean? And so getting the producers was sort of it was like the universe saying, oh yeah, you as you, that's what we want to put on stage.
Everything you're saying is just, it's exactly right. Oh, I'm going to get emotional. It's exactly right. We do kind of, as artists, all artists, we totally. Do kind of totally. What box do I have to put myself in? And what do I need to get rid of? And the truth is people cast you, people hire you because of you.
Yes, 100%. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I even think in a show that is as specific as a Fosse show, those women that get cast in that are not, they get cast because they have that extra something. They have the Fosse and so when you take away your
Yes.
and you make yourself little, you're actually less marketable because you're not all there. So the spark, whatever the spark is about you, bring the spark with you.
Well, your and is so big because you keep learning. And like, so the choice to have kids is a huge shift, right?
Yeah.
As performers, we take care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's our priority. I gotta take care of my voice, I gotta take care of my body. You did a shift and now you're taking care of other people. What's that like?
So I think something that, well, I always wanted to have kids. That was always a big, something you just know, I guess. But choosing to retire, and I mean, I literally sent a retirement letter to the producers. I left the producers. So I wasn't like that ended and then I didn't know what to do. So I really left a very full career at a time when I think I had a lot left, more possibilities. So there's always the thing, you know, what could I have done? But every choice opens other choices as opposed to ends choices. So I think the one thing that helped me was you can do everything, just not all at the same time. So knowing that if I want to have kids, like that for me was something I wanted to. I know lots of working moms. I wanted to be home with the kids. That's the way I was raised. And then truly, as soon as my youngest went to kindergarten, I was like, okay, TikTok, let's go. Next thing. Like I wanted to commit to those years while they were home before kindergarten. And then I knew, but I also experienced like I need more. And I think I'm a better mom now because I'm doing something creative.
Wow. So now you make another shift and you go into education. So your aim is getting bigger. So why teaching?
Well, when I came out here so I had Madeline, and then the very next year I had twins. So for I would say 3 to 4 years, like that was, even if I wanted to do anything else, that was consuming, right? That was just everything. And then a friend of mine, oh, Jiminy Crickets, I'm gonna have to think of his name, but he asked, there's one strong equity theater in Dayton, and they were coming out, he was coming to do Drowsy Chaperone, and he asked me if I would come and audition, and I was like, I haven't done anything in 4 years. So I wound up doing Drowsy Chaperone, and then it's been so long. So this was 10 years ago now. I was the funny, what's her name? I'm gonna have to look it up. Do you know Drowsy Chaperone?
Sort of, but I know that like that someday I want to do the Beth Level track.
Yeah, no, I did the Jennifer Smith track.
Okay.
What's her name? Oh my gosh, this is horrible.
COVID brain. It's okay.
She's the showgirl who's kind of ditzy, and I'm looking it up, but Kitty.
Okay.
So she's like one of the smaller featured parts, but she has a couple of good things. And then this company was doing Caroline or Change. Yeah. And that has Rose, who is the Jewish mother, who's like kind of, it's just a role that in my mind, I was like, I should do this. And so I auditioned for that as well. And I got that. And that was like unbelievable. And so I performed those 2 shows while I had small kids. And it was really interesting. It was very creatively amazing and also reaffirming that I could still do this. but with the, like, trying to, here in regional theater, the rehearsals were in the evenings and on the weekends to accommodate other working people. And that was just not feasible with my life, because I really was still the primary caregiver. And I think if Steve had a more flexible job, we could have done it more. And so we kind of decided, like, those two were kind of back to back. That was too much. And so we were trying to figure out if I could do like one show a year. And then it was just like, there aren't a lot of perfect shows for me, perfect roles for me. And I remember sort of getting hung up on this one audition that I didn't get. And I was like, if I can't get the one job that's perfect, I don't know. It was just, at that point in my life, I didn't want anymore to have others dictate my creative self. I was just kind of like done. And I thought about teaching, actually took a job. I taught in the elementary school for a year. And I was like, yeah, I can't do this age and have kids this age.
Yeah.
And so when I went back to graduate school, my idea was that I would get a graduate degree so that I could teach in college. And I also, with my life and with my kids, the MFA program was just too rigorous in terms of MFA programs. We had one in acting and directing. It required coursework in the morning, you taught in the afternoon, and then you had to be part of the evening performances. And they were 12-hour days. And I was like, that would have been great for me in my 20s, but not now. So I went to the master's program, which is much more on the academic only side. And the program allows you to jump in and do things. So if I wanted to audition or if I wanted to direct, but again, it was really just too much for me to switch from being a stay-at-home mom to being in school full time. That was kind of all I could manage. But then there was a reawakening of my sort of intellectual brain, which had sort of been put aside for so long, and having that stimulated again was fulfilling in a way that I just hadn't been. It checked all the boxes that I was looking for in a way that fit with my life.
So are you? Oh, go ahead. Go.
Oh no! So crazy enough now. There's a university here, Wittenberg University, that's like a mile from my house. And so my first directing job ever was last year. And I directed a play called 7 Homeless Mammoths Wander New England, which is a horrible title for a wonderful play. And we had done our first run through, and then we got shut down.
Oh, no. Oh.
So I experienced the directing world without getting to production. But I mean, we had set pieces going up and we were in the space. I got far enough along that I was like, yes. And so now I'm in talks to maybe direct something there this coming year. So I think for me, there's something, that's the artist scholar part of me. You know, it's like, you never know what you can do. I'm like, oh no, if I can do this. Oh, so nerve wracking. All the adrenaline of being an actor or swing, it's the same as a director. Like I have so much knowledge, but this requires a certain thing. And then
that never ceases to amaze me. I do something different. I play music, but there are still times, that's the most invigorating part of it for me. I still get nervous. I still do really big gigs. When I played with Bob James, where
you were a mess.
I just get, can I do this?
I
can do this. There's that. Okay, I'm gonna just give it my best shot.
It never goes away.
But you think you'll reach this level where you're just like, I'm in control of everything.
Yeah.
But there's still this. Okay, I hope I can do this. Let me see.
Let
me give it my best shot.
I mean, before every show, I'm nervous. I'm never not nervous. I'm not having that adrenaline. And then I think back to like Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick. The show was on their shoulders. You mean that stress of carrying a show? I mean, that's intense, I am sure that before every show, they had some.
And I'm sure that's
adrenaline.
What I'm saying is, I'm sure that's the artist way is, okay,
The artist way.
I'm gonna give this my best shot.
Well, because and also because we care about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
We care what
too
it
much.
what it looks like, what it feels like. Yeah. I think you'd make an amazing director because you have so much to pull from. And I think those are the best directors. The directors that have so much life experience. Also, the best directors are usually former actors as well. Because they're empathetic to the process, to the, I think, and I love that you're like, you can do everything, just not at once. Just
yeah.
by chapter.
And I have a lot of chapters left. So, the other thing is I'm teaching also. So I teach at OSU and I teach undergrads, and that is a similar sort of like, I'm not the, I know some of this stuff, but again, as somebody who I don't have an undergraduate degree in theater. So I go and teach theater history. I'm like, I've been studying it now for a few years, and I've lived it, but it's really different. Some of the other graduate students who are much younger than me have more, I would say, a facile learning of like all of the plays and all of the different. So I recognize that there are holes sort of in everything I've done has always been piecemeal. So I have to know both that means that I have gaps in my knowledge and that I have to know about that and I have to look for them, right? So that they don't surprise me. But also it does, I think what you said, like both as a director, I have all of this, I'm not sort of a one, like I just learned this way. I learned this way. And so I can give out that way. And hopefully like when I ultimately go for a job, when I look at job applications now for colleges, it's ridiculous because they want like, a neuroscience who can tap dance. But
that is you.
But there's a way that I fit those, they kind of cast this wide net. They want all these things. And all of my colleagues are like, oh my God, they want all, and I was like, musical theater? Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can dance. Yeah, I can teach African-American theater. Yeah, I can do that. So there are, I think it's mostly a gift, but I have to be aware that I have gaps.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And that's another thing that's come up in our little masterclass series is that it's the people that want to keep learning and keep in the gaps are the people that are going to keep moving forward, right?
Yeah.
Do you see yourself balancing teaching and performing at some point again? Or do you feel like the fulfillment you're getting right now from teaching fills what you need right now?
I miss it. I'll say that. I do miss it. I miss performing. I miss dancing. I think that was the thing that they always say, a dancer dies to death. When you stop dancing and then so that feels like, I do feel like I'll perform again, but I don't know if I'll ever dance again. I mean, like dance, right? On performing dance. Because returning to that is really different.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised, I'm happily surprised that directing does really fulfill not only the creative thing, but the community experience that I really missed from performing. And whereas going to get a graduate degree and especially dissertation land, it's so isolating. It's so you and your computer. That's the part I struggle with that a lot. And I've struggled with that more this year being here alone in COVID. So recognizing that the directing sort of, I didn't know I needed that, so that was great. I wouldn't say I'll never perform again. Who knows?
Who knows, right? This one.
Okay. Your legacy is going to be epic. Okay. As an actor, professor, a PhD, a mother, what's the next step of achievement that you see, if you see it? Even if it's
like not related to the arts.
Oh no, I'm obsessed with legacy. I am always, and through this last year, I really struggled. One of my struggles was just the isolation, but the other was, I really sort of had to sit down and have a reckoning with the limitations of academia. Like we write stuff and hope that it's important, but often it's just important to these other few people who study the same few things. It's very like siloed. And so I really wanted to make my work important. And so I'm in the beginning of my dissertation, and I'm researching kind of like the history of the chorus girl and the early chorus girls and representations of women on stage. And I really have decided to shift. A huge part of my dissertation is now going to be about the African-American chorus girl, the African-American chorus lines, and the ones, not only the shows that perform for white audiences, but where are the stories of the women in the lines that perform for Black audiences, because those have not been written about or researched. And so that for me is huge. I want this to, I need, something about me needs my work to be important in the current world, not just to other musical theater people, you know?
Amazing.
So that, and I want to write a book. That's always been one of my bucket list things.
You're amazing. I hope our worlds collide. I hope our worlds,
look at this. We've collided. Yeah.
I hope they collide again. Because, we have sort of a weird same trajectory. I mean, we're both teaching, we're both, dabbling in directing and, all of this stuff. But you are truly one of the most electric and talented people I've ever had the opportunity to work with.
Well, thank you. But I told my husband, I was like, I'm doing this interview tomorrow with Chris Latta. And he's like, Chris Latta, he hasn't heard your name in so long. I'm like, I know. I'm like, we've weirdly stayed in touch. And I just was thinking about that. I'm like, I think it's more than just our times that we shared the stage. There's something very parallel in our spirits, I think, both in our love of laughter. But also I think what I aspire to in you, Chris, is this just outpouring of energy and emotion. And you just have this desire to share your enthusiasm. Like, everyone needs that, everything, this is so great. And you guys all need to know how great this is. And I just think that is so admirable.
That is me. I do your enthusiasm. In fact, I think more people have told when I meet people traveling, they're like, I don't know what it is about you, but you're excited about everything. But
the way that you give that to that you're teaching and that you share that with your kids is great.
We're virtual still.
Mm-hmm.
The kids will come, they'll filter back in, but yeah, that was one thing about teaching at home. I really had to make it like another level of performance, energy, because you have to reach through the camera. So some mornings I'd like put on a nice hat, I do whatever it takes to get them to like zoom in. But you're so inspirational, Adrienne. Like, I'm in awe, and so is my cat. In everything that you continue to challenge yourself and accomplish.
It's a lot, but I thank you. I think it's
on the back. You are like the bomb, diggity. Really. So wait, do you have any questions? Do you have anything you want to like promote or talk about really quickly about like things that you want people to look out for? Or
I would say I have just two things. One is that when I look back on all of the shows that I've done, I don't think I did at the time, but I'm very grateful that some of the shows that I almost never took shows for granted, in that the smaller shows that I did were sometimes the most, you never know where the art is going to happen. And so some of those crazy shows that you throw up in 2 weeks, there might have been messy stuff happening, but there was a kernel of some magic that happened. And, some other show where, you got paid nothing. But I remember going down to this theater. We got paid very little, but I don't know what, it was Seaside Music Theater, which is closed now. But had such a love for their actor. They made our clothes for us. Like you felt like $1 million because they made your clothes out of muslin, and then they had people learning how to do costumes. They had a milliner when we did Music Man. I had this crazy, amazing hat. We had a full orchestra. So even though like we didn't get paid very much, we got the experience of treated like really high class actors. And that was a gift, a huge gift. And so I think all of these productions I got gifts from, and that I tried to be open to those at all times. The other thing though is that I've learned here, so my daughter Evie is 14, and she's the only one who really loves theater, and she loves it. And she's very talented and does a lot of online stuff now. But since I've been here, a young woman graduated from the theater department here at Wittenberg and started this youth company here. And it was something that I like considered doing, but I was like, yeah, no, I don't know why I just didn't. And I am in awe of her, because what she has done over the last 8 years is she has grown this group of, she's made a place for these kids to develop. She's brought in workshop people. She brings them when we're allowed to go to this national theater conference. I mean, she has pushed these kids and given them opportunities. And I used to think if you graduated with a theater degree, right, my goal was Broadway. And when I look at her, and she's married and has a house, and she's not even 30 yet, right? She's made a life in theater here in this small town, and she's made such a huge difference. So she has a professional in theater as far as I'm concerned. And she is using her theater knowledge. I mean, she's making a life and sharing her life in theater in a way that I think is so admirable. And I think that if you are a student who loves theater, like there's so many paths that are not Broadway that are ways that you can have theater in your life forever, you know, professionally or not. But that is her job. She is working in theater. And she might not ever leave Springfield.
That's so great. And that's really affirming to people that aren't on Broadway. You know?
Yeah. Well, and your goal doesn't have to be, if you're, you know, maybe that is your goal, but if it isn't, or if you're like, I don't know, just there are other things out there, you know.
That's amazing.
Yeah. She's really.
I think that I've watched Evie perform. I've watched she's got a lot of your spark. I mean, there's no doubt. So that's very exciting that you've got a little theater bug planted in one of your humans. Your face is gorgeous.
Thank you.
Are an inspiration. You have thrown some amazing jewels of knowledge that I'm so grateful for. We end every episode the same way.
Okay.
Love you.
I love you.
And we love you.
I love you guys. You're adorable.